What's up, everybody? Welcome to dinner bonus number 3. And we're going to be getting some things ready as we get started here. Megan's gathering some stuff out of the refrigerator. Let me make sure, I'm going to go over to the computer and make sure that I can see everything that's going on within the Zoom window. So I'll put this here on Megan. Say hi. Welcome back. Okay, let's see. Pretty good right there. I'll try not to move this too much to make you guys car sick on a Zoom call. Here.
All right, so heads up, everyone. We had an Instacart order go awry. So we're a little bit off with the. What? Someone just died.
Uh-oh. Oh, hold on a second. Let's see. Might have switched devices here. Okay, let's see. Switch. I'll get this. There we go. Okay. We are back. Yeah.
Okay, so as I was saying, we had an Instacart order become a problem. So there's a couple of things that I propose guys to use that we're going to plan to use that are not here yet. They may or may not arrive while we are in the midst of cooking, and if they do, great. Because the biggest thing we're missing is the apples. I also would normally put onions in this curry for myself. It's not absolutely necessary if you don't like onions. I like them, and we do not have it. So I'm just gonna make it without, but you could certainly chop onions, and I'll explain to you how much and when. The apples that are not here are gonna make things a little bit trickier. So what we're gonna do with the apples is if they arrive during this period of time while we're filming, we'll make them at the end. If they don't, I will give a quick explanation of exactly how to make them because they're very simple, and then we will make a recording after the fact to go through, and Justin will post that later, but they are extraordinarily simple. It's literally just like melting a little butter, throw some cinnamon on there, put them in the oven. So they're gonna be very easy. So first thing we're gonna do is I have this pack of organic boneless, skinless chicken breasts. In a perfect world, I like to have pasture-raised chicken. Near us, that's not always possible to find, and right now is a little bit difficult to get pasture-raised chicken breasts even from the farms that do regenerative pasture-raised chickens. So right now I just have organic chicken, which is fine if that's what you have. But just to know for anyone, exactly. So you guys know for anyone who isn't aware of this before, organic chicken is good, but pasture-raised chicken is the best. That's ideally what we want. Those chickens are getting, the ability to roam free, and they're also on a normal chicken diet, which is omnivorous. Some people don't know.
Let me try to switch this because it seems the camera setting is weird right now.
Okay.
Hold on, everybody. We're having some technical difficulties here. Let's see if this will go to. There we go. Got it. Okay. Fixed it. That'll be better for you guys. Can get the widescreen a little bit better. So you're talking about pasture-raised chickens. They're super tricky to get.
I don't understand what changed, but that's fine. Yeah, so pasture-raised chickens are given free reign to roam around their normal habitat. They are omnivorous, which is what chickens should be. If you notice on this organic chicken that I have here, I'll hold it up, but it's very difficult to read. So this is just organic chicken that I got from Whole Foods here. Most organic chicken, if you look on the front, most chicken in general that you get in the United States will say raised on a vegetarian diet. This is like a lot of food company stuff. This is a claim, a euphemistic claim that's made on the front of something that is like, sounds great. We're making it on the front, vegetarian diet. And because it contains words and like phrasing that seems positive, people often think like, oh, that's a plus, but it's actually not. Ideally, you want chickens that are not raised on a vegetarian diet. You want chickens that are raised on a omnivorous diet, which is pasture-raised chickens. But for the sake of this, we have no antibiotics, no added hormones, organic vegetarian raised chicken, which is the next best thing, and that's what we're going to use today. Real quick, I'm just going to drain this pack of chicken, and then I'm going to cut it up into strips because that's how I like to cook my chicken. If you prefer to cook your chicken as chicken breasts, that's totally fine, especially if you're watching this afterward and not following along live. You can cut it, or you can cook it however you like to cook it. I like to cut it in strips because it's easier for me to see it and it's faster to cook. And we're going to chop it up to put it in the curry anyway. So whatever you like, pick your poison.
Cool. Yeah, so this is a pretty relatively simple recipe in terms of time and stuff. We try to give you guys mostly recipes that you can get done relatively quickly. I think the first one we did took about an hour, but realistically a little less than that because we were obviously talking to the camera and doing things like that.
Yeah, this is a really, really quick and easy recipe. Like Justin said, as we're talking through it, it's going to take a little bit more time just because I'm explaining myself. But I make this chicken curry is what I eat most days for breakfast right now. And I make it for myself fresh every morning. You could absolutely meal prep it and make more at one time. But I make it fresh for myself every morning, and I doubt it takes me more than 20 minutes, probably less than that. And usually I'll do it as I'm kind of sipping on some superfood and cacao. And I'm, maybe reading my Kindle, and so I'm running a very relaxed process, and I still think it takes me about 20 minutes to cook it, all things said and done, which is another reason why I cut the chicken into strips. It just makes that faster and significantly easier. I think it's probably a 10-minute total cook time with the actual chicken, but we're going to find out today because I don't time it. I just use a little, I just usually use a thermometer. Chicken, you want to get to 165 degrees internally for it to be safe. So we'll time it today since we're here. I'll turn the timer on so we can give you guys an estimate for anyone who does not have a thermometer handy, but I recommend that you get one because sometimes different pieces of chicken can be different and it does vary. And the best way to cook meat always is using an internal temperature thermometer because it just makes sure that you're not going to overcook anything. I'm like just more worried about like foodborne illness than I am about overcooking. So I especially like the food thermometer because I'll end up kind of leaning onto the safe side, which I think is maybe better, but then the likelihood that you overcook something is pretty decent. So
yeah. When I first started cooking for myself without a meat thermometer, I would end up doing the same thing. I'd inevitably just overcook almost everything that I was cooking. For that reason, you just get a little nervous. You don't want to be consuming raw, undercooked stuff, and you end up just cooking things for too long and ending up with like super rough steak or really dry chicken or things like that. So the thermometer is the way to go. We actually had a fancy one was given to us for Christmas. Apparently, like there are these new wireless thermometers that are Bluetooth enabled and they sync with your phone, so they can actually tell your phone when your food is ready and things like that, which is really cool. We haven't unboxed that one yet. So we'll be using our just traditional corded meat thermometer, which also works perfectly. I think it's great as well.
So what I've done so far is just trim the pieces of the chicken that have excess tendon or fat on the side, and I'm just cutting these into little strips that are, I'd say, somewhere between, they're like 3/4 of an inch-ish wide. It's not a perfect science. I just try to get them pretty consistent with each other. And so I try to make sure that these pieces of chicken can be cooked together in a way that is not totally far off, although sometimes based on the shape of the chicken breast, like you kind of get me. So I'm just cutting these into relatively even slices, and they're probably somewhere between 1/2 inch and 3/4 inch wide each. And I'm just cutting down the length of the chicken breast. I'm cutting like sort of parallel to what would be the sternum of the chicken, if you're thinking about it in that way. And like I said before, if you want to cut these into different shape pieces, if you prefer to chop them up when the chicken is raw, I find that to be a little bit more difficult. The chicken's harder for me to work with in that way when it's raw, so I don't like to do that. But if that is your jam, by all means, you can do that. We are eventually going to dice up this chicken into like 1/2 inch by 1/2 inch sort of bite-sized pieces. So, pick whatever works nicely for you. Just cutting this up. And we're ready. Okay. I'm very weird about getting chicken on my hands. So if you notice ever that I'm being like very, very particular about how I handle chicken, that's just a me thing. You absolutely do not have to do that. I have a weird textured hand thing with chicken.
Also worth noting, this is a tiny little piece of chicken trivia and health and wellness trivia, is that most chicken that you're going to get, like we talked about, it's very, very difficult to get pasture-raised chicken in most grocery stores. Sometimes Whole Foods will have it here in Austin. It's rare. Sometimes we get lucky. Unless you're going to a local farmer who is letting those chickens forage, in which case they're eating a lot of like bugs and insects and things like that. Or you get lucky and get a farmer who really understands what's going on and they feed the chicken actual liver, like cow liver. That's amazing for that to happen. But it's very, very rare. So what ends up happening is, generally speaking, if somebody is eating like grass-fed steak or something like that, I don't really recommend getting rid of the fat or taking the fat off. The fat is incredibly beneficial for your health. But if you're dealing with chickens that are vegetarian fed, they're usually fed things that contain high amounts of polyunsaturated fats, which I talk about with you guys a lot. Polyunsaturated fats are not great for your metabolism. They're not great for cellular health. They're the main reason why seed oils are so harmful. So when you're eating chicken and you don't know where it comes from, you don't know if it's pasture raised and all that, it probably has a very high PUFA content in the fat of the chicken. So anytime we're eating chicken, we're very careful about cutting off all of the excess fat and not purposely eating the fat or the skin of the chicken.
Which is quite easy to do when you've got boneless, skinless chicken breasts because they're pretty lean.
Yeah.
So it's a pretty easy thing to do, but yeah, we cut all of the fat off the chicken.
Yeah.
All right, so those chicken strips are just resting over by the stove. I have them sitting over by a pan. To cook those chicken pieces, we're going to use a medium to large, depending on how much chicken you're cooking, sized saute pan or frying pan, whatever you call it. We have a non-stick ceramic, so it's not Teflon. I don't know if we mentioned this in a previous video, but we have ceramic pans, which are fantastic because it reduces the amount of oil or butter, in this case, that you have to use to cook the food on. But it also doesn't have any of the yucky stuff that traditional non-stick surfaces do. So highly recommend a high quality set of ceramic pans if you don't already have one.
Yeah.
All right, so I told you guys to get some form of carrots. Normally what I like to do is get just the shredded carrots for this because I think the texture of that is kind of nice. I usually get shredded carrots at Whole Foods that are just organic shredded carrots, but they did not have those. So for the sake of this, I have these carrot chips, which just in the interest of time, I'm going to chop these up for you as the example today, but you could just as easily, we have whole carrots in the fridge and you could just as easily use that. It doesn't really matter. If I were using large sized carrots, I would trim the skin off the carrots and then I would cut them lengthwise into 4 quarters and then chop them and use kind of those bite-sized pieces. Whenever I'm cooking something like this that's going to be eaten with a spoon, I always try to think about the spoon ratio when I'm cutting up the pieces of any of the vegetables or the items that are going to be in a spoon. So think about the size of the spoon, and I'm just going to cut this kind of lengthwise like this. You can chop your carrots any way that you like, but as I was saying, one of the best things I try to think about is the concept of what's going to literally be in the spoon that you're eating it with. So this is the sort of spoon we're going to eat this curry with, and it's going to end up being sort of like not quite fully soup, but it's going to be a very brothy kind of experience. So inside the spoon, when I'm thinking about cutting carrots, like I don't want something this size because it takes up essentially the entire spoon, and then you really struggle to get a good cohesive bite, which includes like all of the components of what's in the food. So whenever I'm cooking something that is eaten with a spoon, I try to consider the size of the serving spoon when it comes to like how many things can fit on there and what different components exist. So that's why we're going to chop up the chicken. That's why the carrots are going to be kind of small, and then I'll cut the broccoli here in a minute. If I were cutting onions for this dish, which I normally would be, I would dice them up decently small for this for the same reason. Keep cutting these guys. I'm using 1 pound of, maybe 1.5 pounds of chicken for this recipe today. That's enough for Justin and I to eat 1 meal. We will pretty typically, when we're eating a meal, each of us eats 1/2 pound or slightly more than 1/2 pound of meat in that meal. That is much more than what most Americans eat.
Yeah.
So for most people, 1 pound, we're probably going to eat 3/4 pound of meat each in this recipe. For most American families, if you looked at a recipe, 1 pound would say serves 4. So whenever you're looking at something like that, if you're ever adopting another recipe to be more Clovis friendly, I would say pay attention to the protein to non-protein ratio and double the amount of protein relative to the rest of everything else, depending on how much you're trying to get in your diet. I know in the groups, I see a lot of people asking like, oh, I'm struggling to get enough protein. And I think one of the main reasons that happens for people is that when they're sitting down and eating protein, they're just actually, they've been taught to eat such small portions of protein that they're getting, 3 or 4 ounces of chicken. Whereas today, I will probably eat 10 ounces of chicken in a bowl for this meal. And I have already eaten 2 other meals of that size, or 1.5 at the very least.
Mm-hmm.
You gonna say something about that?
Yeah, no, and I was just going to comment on, your size and how much you weigh. And it's just like the fear of protein, or the programming and brainwashing we receive through our whole lives of how much protein to eat is just kind of crazy. It's, yeah. Megan takes in a lot of protein.
Now I'm going to cut up this broccoli. I think what I told you guys on the recipe was to get any kind of vegetables that you like. These are my choices. They absolutely do not have to be yours. I choose broccoli not because of any sort of like specific nutritional value. In fact, Justin will tell you that broccoli has very little nutritional value, especially when you start to consider the bioavailability of the nutrition in broccoli. I personally think broccoli tastes really good, so I like it. Please do not feel the need to choose the same vegetables as me. These are strictly like personally chosen, and they are for texture and for color and because I like the way they taste. But they certainly don't have to be the ones you choose. Go for whatever feels good to you, whatever is available on your foods list, and whatever makes your body feel good. That's the other thing. A lot of people are sensitive to certain vegetables, just because your gut microbiome is specific to you, and a variety of plants have a variety of different plant toxins in them, or other things that make them a little bit difficult for certain people to digest. So cauliflower gives me a lot of trouble. Brussels sprouts are a problem for Justin. I do really, really well with broccoli, and broccoli likes me, and I like broccoli. So definitely, if you have not already, feel free to experiment with vegetables and pay really close attention to what your body responds well to. In my experience, contrary to what happens in my body with other foods, which can take a longer time for my body to start showing signs of distress around, vegetables are pretty quick. So gluten will mess me up, but usually it takes a couple of days for me to start seeing signs of gluten problems, and then they can last for up to a few weeks. Whereas something like cauliflower, that my gut just really doesn't like, easily within a few hours, and for no longer than 24 hours, my system will sort of get upset. And so it's a little bit of a clearer picture in my experience. And I think in your experience as well, when it comes to trying to be able to understand whether certain vegetables are or are not friendly with your whole microbiome. And maybe from a biochemical perspective, you can speak to that better, but anecdotally, I think that's the way that it tends to work.
Yeah. Yeah, it just depends on what is inside of it. Like a lot of the anti-nutrients in these leafy greens and things like that would be considered like these much smaller particles than something like gluten, which is a giant protein, right? So proteins are pretty problematic. Something like gluten, there are a lot of people that are sensitive to gluten that don't even see a reaction of any kind. Up to 72 hours after ingesting gluten, you can start to show signs of having had a problem from gluten, which is what makes it so difficult for people to diagnose things like either celiac or even non-celiac gluten sensitivity. Is very, very difficult because people will they'll get this skin issues or migraines or stomach upset or something like that, and they're looking back over that day or what they ate a few hours earlier or something like that. And if they haven't had any gluten, then it escapes their mind that 72 hours earlier they had gluten that they're now having a reaction to. It's really, really tricky.
It actually took me a really long time for that very reason to figure out that gluten was a problem for me, both because it did not come up on my very, very expensive and exhaustive food sensitivity test, and also because gluten is sort of cumulative for me, and I have a delayed response to it. So if I eat one bowl of pasta one day, I might be fine, but if I ate that same bowl of pasta 3 times over the course of 5 days, on the 4th day or 6th day, I might start showing symptoms, and then those symptoms would last for a week or 2. And so what ends up happening in my body is something that's very difficult to track backward until I had done such a significant amount of, N of 1 self-experimentation when it came to the food that I was eating, a significant number of, how many experimental dietary changes did we make for me by the time we figured that out? It was one of the most recent ones.
Yeah, it was great.
Coffee was the only one more difficult.
Yeah, we discovered coffee is a big problem for Megan, and almost that's a pretty quick trigger. That's within a couple of days.
Yeah, but grateful too. The only reason we actually totally figured that out is because of Italian coffee. So
yeah, that's true.
All right, so I have just taken a couple of garlic cloves. This again is totally optional. I've taken a couple of garlic cloves and I'm gonna put these in with the vegetables because I like the way they taste. The curry paste will already likely have some amount of garlic in there, so this is not necessary, but if you are big into garlic like me, you can absolutely do it. I think the flavor profile is better when you have a layered experience of garlic, so I like having some in the curry, and I like some having been cooked with the vegetables. So I'm gonna take this garlic press 2 cloves of garlic in here. Great. Then I'm going to take like maybe half a tablespoon of butter. Eyeball it, but that's about how much I use. Half a tablespoon of butter, and then I'm going to take some bone broth, and this is a great trick for anyone who wants to cook vegetables and kind of do a saute-esque kind of thing. I'll do what is kind of a saute steaming hybrid when it comes to the vegetables that I'm cooking. I like this because I think steaming ends up making vegetables a little mushy and flavorless, but sauteing often takes more fat than I really want to be using. So I'll put a little bit of butter in here, a little bit of bone broth, which adds and helps there be a little bit more moisture and flavor in the steaming process, and kind of do this hybrid thing where the vegetables get steamed as they're kind of being sauteed. And ultimately what happens is they cook faster and they have that same kind of like depth of flavor that comes with sauteing without having to use quite as much fat. So when you're watching your fat content, which depending on the cycle that we're in for how much we're lifting, what we're doing diet-wise at the time, sometimes that is the case. And I know for you all that might be the case. This is a really great hack. So half a tablespoon of butter, and I'm going to grab some bone broth out of the closet right now.
We have Kettle and Fire bone broth right now. There are a lot of good brands. Epic makes a really good bone broths that are actually stored in glass, which is pretty cool, which is fun. They have those usually at Whole Foods. This is just the Kettle and Fire, the original classic bone broth that we're using. Beef bone broth, which is amazing.
Be careful not to accidentally get one of their soups that are made with beef bone broth and then go to use that because it's a very good
yeah, for sure.
They look really similar, and I've had people buy those before and end up with the wrong one. All right, so I just shook this up a little bit. I'm gonna take this out. I don't usually measure this, I eyeball it, but for the sake of this experience, I am gonna measure it because I want you guys to have a sense. I know some people are much less eyeball types than me. If you are the sort of person who wants to eyeball it, we may drain some of this beef broth at the end. We may not use all of it, and so don't feel like there's an absolutely perfect amount that you want to use in here. It's not crucial to the recipe that you use the exact amount that I did. So if you're an eyeball type and you just want to toss them in, I'd say, do a couple centimeters deep bone broth. If you want to actually measure it, I'm going to measure it for you.
Okay.
Let's see. This is a 1/3 cup, so we'll try this first and see how we're doing. It's close. Okay, so I'd say half a cup of bone broth. All right, we've got that half tablespoon of butter. I'm going to throw some salt in here. Salt is just going to be to taste, so we like a pretty significant amount of salt, so I'm going to salt this nicely. And I'm going to put this over on the stovetop, and we're going to leave the vegetables for a minute while we start the chicken, because the chicken needs to cook for longer than the vegetables do. And I just checked on the apples, and it looks like they're going to be delivered while we're still on this call.
Amazing. We can make our dessert.
Fantastic. All right, so we're going to take about a tablespoon, maybe a little less than a tablespoon of butter, and we're going to melt this into a large ceramic saute pan, as I said, on medium-high heat. I'm going to let that prep and sit there and wait until that butter melts. Once that's done, we're going to take some tongs. I'm going to place all of these chicken strips on there. I'm going to start a timer so we can give you guys a sense of how long these take to cook in case you do not have an internal meat thermometer, but I would say absolutely order one of those / go pick one up if you don't already have them. It is an absolute life changer thing. I cooked without it for a really long time, and I don't know why. Like, I don't know how much. I think they're 20 or 30 bucks, and they're completely life changing tools. So go get yourself one if you don't already.
Yeah, what I can do too is I can gather some links. I can do a link for the exact meat thermometer that we have that we're going to use here today. I can put that into the show notes for this recording.
All right, let's turn 6:13. All right, in 13 minutes we may have apples. This could be great. All right, stopwatch ready. Okay.
I'll also have you guys take a look at just some of the brands that we're using. I'm assuming if most of our stuff is usually purchased from either Whole Foods or Sprouts, depending on what we're doing. If we're on Instacart, we're usually getting from Sprouts. And then if we're in-person shopping, a lot of the time we end up at Whole Foods. So hopefully you guys will have some of the same brands in your area. If not, you guys know from following your Clovis approved foods list that all you have to do is just be a label detective. If you're looking for curry or coconut milk or anything like that, just make sure you're checking the ingredients on all the products that you pick up. They don't have to be brand specific as long as you're being really careful about checking the ingredients labels on everything you're buying.
Yeah, I would say that what I find most commonly that's a problem in light coconut milk, if you get it in a can, is carrageenan.
Yeah.
So make sure that you're finding a light coconut milk without carrageenan. That's typically the only like no item that I notice in light coconut milk, especially if it's organic light coconut milk bought from a holistic kind of food store. I don't think I put this in the list, but I'm gonna throw a little garlic powder and onion powder on this chicken. Again, this is totally optional. If you want to do this and you have this, you can. A little paprika would also go nicely on here, or anything that typically is found in curry paste or curry powder. A little turmeric would be fine. Anything that feels like it's in the same flavor family. If you want to throw it on the chicken, you're welcome to, but it's absolutely not necessary because, like I said, this is going to end up in kind of like a soup. So I like the taste of this, and sometimes we save a couple of these pieces of chicken for the next morning. So I try to put a little extra something on them, but this is, I mean, very, very minimal and very simple. This is just a little extra. This one.
There we go. Let there be light.
All right, I'm gonna throw some salt on top. The salt I would do regardless, even if you're not doing any other spices on this. I would throw some salt on there. I'm gonna also do pepper, and since we've been in the habit of doing this white pepper since we've been, I actually have been using this white pepper ever since we talked about it on the first one. We're almost through it. Yeah, so throw a little salt and pepper on there. Optionally, anything in the garlic, onion, paprika, turmeric kind of family. Okay, that's good. I'm just doing basically a loose coating over that. We're keeping this over medium-high heat, and we're going to let these kind of continue to work on themselves for a minute here.
Ooh, timer.
Oh, shit.
The timer will be a little off. That's okay.
Let's say that was 2 minutes ago.
Yeah, probably about that.
All right. So when you're looking at this visually, and that's what I always try to do, when you're looking at this chicken visually, I'm trying to flip it over. Once the largest piece gets to the point where it's looking white and opaque up the side, starting up toward the top. That's when I like to flip them. That usually means they're in a good place to have cooked through well enough that they can be flipped to the other side. And then they usually only need a few more minutes. So visually, that's kind of what I'm looking for. But again, we're going to use the thermometer here. All right, here is our here's our light coconut milk that we're going to be using. We'll open that in a second. And then in terms of other things that we've purchased for this is the curry paste that I'm using. I've bought a couple of different curry pastes from this brand. If you like something that's pretty spicy, these are great. They are quite spicy. We're going to go a little bit less heavy on the curry paste today because if I were eating this for breakfast, I like to be quite spicy. Justin likes to be less spicy, so we're going to use a little bit less. But when you're looking for a curry paste, the vast majority of them should be full of stuff that's totally okay for the Clovis approved foods list. I very rarely come across one. Curry sauces, when you buy a pre-made curry sauce, very rarely is it okay. Mostly most of the curry sauces that I've seen on the shelves contain one or more forms of things that are not on the Clovis approved foods list, including seed oils. These curry pastes, on the other hand, are really easy to mix into coconut milk. You can also control the fat content of your curry sauce by using light coconut milk instead of full fat coconut milk, which is great. But on top of that, these curry pastes are almost always great in terms of like looking for things that are approved or follow the approved foods list. So when you look at the ingredients here, I mean, all we have happening here, we have shallots, garlic, lime juice, Himalayan pink salt, dried chili, turmeric, coriander, fennel, cumin, cinnamon, and clove. All of these are organic ingredients. All of these are just spices. So you can use the vast majority of curry paste, especially the organic ones that you find in stores near you. They should be vegan, they should be gluten-free, and they should be, some of them I guess contain like fish sauce, so you might find one that's not vegan, which may or may not matter to you. They should be free of nuts and they should be free of oils, the majority of them. So double check, but usually when I'm looking for something, even if we're in kind of a conventional store in a part of the world where I know I'm not going to get like our typical quality of stuff that we would find in a big city Whole Foods, I can usually find a Thai curry paste and it'll be something that I can use. So this is an easy thing to do. All right, I'm going to start up the vegetables right now. I'm going to turn these on high just to get them started. And once they start to simmer, I'm going to give them a little stir, and then I'm going to put the pot lid kind of half on and let those kind of like simmer in the butter bone broth mix for a minute. All right, in the meantime, these are looking like ready to turn over. So I'm going to take a look at what's happening here. So
yeah, you want to explain that white again while we have the camera on it?
Yeah, so as you can see, there's like an opacity to the side of the chicken that is moving up the sides. And so largely what we're looking for is that like this piece is probably the biggest, slowest piece. This piece is starting to see the white opaque parts of the chicken come onto the top of the little chicken slice that I've made here. So that's what we want. We want to see like that white opaque part kind of start to creep over the sides and onto the top of the largest piece, and that's when we know we're ready to flip everything. And this is not a perfect science, you guys. Like what I'm attempting to do here is make sure that we're kind of cooking them evenly on both sides, but it's not perfect. So you know, don't feel like this is like many things. This is equal parts art and science, and maybe even a little less science than that.
And again, she'll double check the biggest piece of chicken with the thermometer to make sure that everything is good before we move forward with the rest of the recipe.
Okay, I'm gonna leave that a little bit. Continue. Great. How are our vegetables doing? I'm turning my camera now.
You got it. And you're just waiting for a simmer here, right?
Yep. I'm just waiting for starting to heat up. This will just take a second to get to a light simmer, and then we'll be in good shape there. The butter is starting to kind of melt. We just want this to get to just a very light simmer. So right now we're at a medium-high heat. I'm trying to let this get warm enough that it gets to a simmer, and then as it's just beginning to start here, we're going to wait until we've got a rapid simmer that's going to continue through stirring. Once we get to that point, I'm going to turn this down to a low heat and put the lid to this pot on about halfway. Or I'm going to leave it sort of like cracked so that there's space for the steam to kind of come out of the pot, which is going to give us the ability to have that kind of like hybrid saute steaming effect. Yeah, there we go. Starting to simmer up there. Okay. All right, that's looking good. We're going to turn that down to kind of a medium low heat, and I'm going to leave the lid on like that so that it's kind of like trapping some amount of it, but also letting a good bit of steam escape. Okay, that is looking ready to go. Just going to leave this chicken here until it's finished. See if our Instacart is on the way still. Oh yeah, driver's 3 minutes away.
All right, we can do dessert.
All right, we're gonna do dessert. That's great. Okay, so now we're just gonna chill and let that wait. The only thing we have to do beyond this is mix the curry into the coconut milk, which we're gonna do in the pot the vegetables are in. And then we're gonna chop the chicken once that is finished. And we're going to put some or all, depending on how much you want to put in your curry, we're gonna put some or all of that in the pot, mix it all up, and we're gonna let everything finish in the sauce. I like to let everything kind of sit warm, not boiling, but like just warming in the sauce, that chicken and all the vegetables kind of soak up that good curry flavor. It's kind of like if anybody here is Italian or familiar with Italian food, like you always want to finish your pasta in the sauce because it just really soaks up the saucy flavor really, really well.
And also, it's probably worth noting that everything that you're doing here, would you say is safe to say that you could make the curry sauce and everything else exactly the way you want to, but you could sub some other type of meat if you wanted to, right?
Yeah, you could make this with anything else. You could make this, some days we don't have chicken, and I make this with ground beef. You could make this with any kind of meat that you like. It really is just a matter of like what you like in terms of flavor profile with your curry. So ground pork would be really good with this too, or you could even make pork chops and cut it up. You could do whatever you like. Anything that lends itself really well to small bites. So ground meat of any kind, or anything that's good to kind of like chop up into pieces, like skirt steak might be really good for this. Skirt steak is also incredibly fast. And I don't like it when my food gets cold, and my one beef with skirt steak, even though I love it, is that it gets kind of cold pretty quickly because it doesn't retain a lot of heat because it's so small, it's so thin. So skirt steak might be great with this. You can slice it, cook it really quick, 2 minutes on each side, cook it rare, slice it up, cut it up into pieces after you let it rest for a couple minutes, and then put that in the curry. It could be also phenomenal. There's the apples.
All right. And how about, do you think you could do some kind of fish with this, like salmon or something like that?
It might fall apart.
Yeah.
I think I would sooner do like shrimp and or scallops.
Oh, shrimp,
like
yeah.
I would put shrimp in the curry. That would be great.
Shrimp curry would be great.
Yeah. Yeah, we cook a lot of shrimp around here. So,
yeah, love shrimp.
Shrimp in the curry would be fantastic. You're gonna go grab the apples?
Yeah.
Okay, great. I'm gonna check on the temperature of these guys. See how we're doing here. Great. Okay, so these pieces of chicken are finished. We are at 9 minutes, and I think we started about 2 minutes earlier than the timer began. So I think we're at 11 minutes of total cook time for these pieces of chicken. So I'm going to grab these off of here. I'm going to let this rest for just a sec. Don't worry too much about letting chicken rest relative to like red meat, but in order to keep the juiciness intact, you want to let it rest for a little bit of time. I'm going to let this hang out in here for just a minute, and then we're going to take it to the cutting board and chop it into pieces and put it in the veggies. By the way, if anyone's looking for it, this is the thermometer that Justin's going to put on the, what are you going to do? Put the link on this somewhere?
In the show notes, yeah.
Okay. So the link will be available to this. This one is really effective and super easy to use. There are many, and many of them are just as good as any of the others. I don't think I've ever been like super particular about hunting for one of these. Don't buy the cheapest one because some of them tend to be kind of melty and a little shitty, but for the most part, like I think 25 bucks goes a long way when it comes to one of these things, and it will change your life. Let's see how the veggies are doing. Veggies are looking good. So you don't have to stir these guys every so often because they are in kind of this like buttery bone broth bath. So I'll try to show you guys real quick so you can see. There we go. So we're still simmering here, and we're getting a good bit of cooking done here. How much you want to cook your vegetables is up to you. Depends on how crispy you like them to be. I like mine to be pretty al dente, so I'm not going to cook them too much more than this. I'm going to leave them on for a couple more minutes while we chop up the chicken. They've been cooking on here for, I'd say, about 5 minutes thus far in this kind of like simmery, steamy solution. And we're going to leave them there for another couple minutes, and then we're going to drain the bone broth out of this, about half of the bone broth out of this, add the chicken, and then put the curry sauce all together in this one pot. That's the other thing about this curry is you could cook the curry sauce separately. Some people like to warm their curry paste first and then add the coconut milk. That is the traditionally correct way to do it. I find that the flavor profile isn't that different when you do that. And when I'm in a hurry, I like to do it all in one pot. So I do it this way. You could heat the curry sauce separately if you like. Okay. This guy. interest of showing this demonstration, I'm going to take 4 pieces of this, chop this up, and I'm going to put these in there. And I'm gonna
So while you're chopping this up, we have a couple of cool questions here in the chat. So one question is, do you recommend any gluten-free pasta?
Oh, I was wondering what that pasta thing that I mentioned, how much that would come up. There is a cassava pasta that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's fine. It is definitely the best that pasta can be. I don't know why I'm doing this with these utensils because it's terrible.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's about the best that pasta can get, but it definitely doesn't taste like wheat pasta.
Yeah.
So
that's the thing,
you
isn't it?
gotta get, like, your ability to eat gluten-free pasta and enjoy it depends heavily on your ability to not compare it to glutinous pasta.
Yes, exactly. It's never quite the same.
Yeah, it won't be quite the same, but it's called, the brand is called Jovial.
Jovial? Okay.
I think it's spelled like the adjective, Jovial, I think. And they make rice pasta. They also make cassava pasta. Their rice pasta is brown rice pasta, and I'm sure you guys know already that Justin doesn't like brown rice because it's full of arsenic. Heavier in arsenic, I suppose is a more accurate way to say that.
Yeah.
All right. So we've got some chopped up chicken here. I'm going to put this in the pot, and I'm going to actually first. I'm going to turn this heat off. I'm going to drain about half of the remaining bone broth out of here. So I want to leave what is like, you know, I'd say what's left in here is like less than a tablespoon. It's essentially just enough to like barely not even coat the bottom. I just want to leave enough in there so that none of the vegetables stick while I'm doing everything else that I want to do. I'm going to take this back over here. The heat is off on this burner. So for right now, I'm just going to put the chopped chicken in this pan. And then we're gonna make this curry sauce. All right. I'm going to open this can, which I always have trouble with. See if I can do it today. Justin always ends up having to open up cans for me.
Ooh.
I think it's got one brand.
You got it.
Coconut milk really gives you trouble. This is fine. Okay. All right. Can open completed. All right. I'm gonna put this whole can. This is 13.5 ounces. It's a normal size can. I'm gonna put this whole size can in the pot. You probably will not need this much sauce. I will probably save this sauce for later, depending on how many vegetables you put in your curry. Now I'm gonna turn this back up to medium heat.
Yeah, she almost always has leftover curry sauce. She really likes the curry sauce, so she can use it for all sorts of things.
You could make less. Sorry guys, this burner is in trouble sometimes. This burner. You could use less coconut milk if you want, but I find that I end up wasting the coconut milk if I end up wasting the coconut milk if I save it in a can. Whereas if I put the rest of the coconut milk in here and make a curry sauce and end up having more sauce than I want to have, I just put the sauce in a little container and then I end up using the sauce on other chicken or other meats later. So your call, but I'm going to give you the recipe to make enough for one can. So now we've got this whole pot on medium heat sitting on here warming up, and as soon as this gets to a light simmer, I'm going to put in about a tablespoon of this yellow curry paste and a little bit of salt and maybe a squeeze of a piece of citrus if you happen to have one around. Also not necessary, but it can brighten up the flavor a little bit. Let's see. What was fit in there? Can you place this here in a place that will work? And then, actually, no, I'm good. I'll wash this there.
Okay.
All right, so we're just gonna wash that pot and hold it well. And I'm gonna rinse off this knife so that we can eventually be capable of cutting apples with it. And the onions came just in time for me to not use them.
Hoping you guys are enjoying the camera work and not getting made sick by it. Trying to keep it as steady as I can. So far, so good.
I think people are kind of used to moving cameras now because of
Yeah.
the internet. So this is, as we mentioned, a very chill experience. If you wanted to make your coconut milk a little thicker without using full fat coconut milk, one of the things that you could use is xanthan gum. I'm not going to because I don't like the texture of it for me. There we go. And I don't mean that the mouthfeel is bad. The texture of the actual sauce is not weird. I just mean that I like my curry to be a little soupier and not quite so saucy. If you want yours to be more of a sauce texture where it's a bit thicker and less like the texture of a soup, you could add some xanthan gum. It looks like this. You can get some at Whole Foods. You can get some at Sprouts. Xanthan gum is works a lot like what's that called? Corn
Starch?
Yes, cornstarch. I was like, corn powder? What am I thinking of? Works a lot like cornstarch in things in the sense that you can use it to thicken basically any sauce, but you use a lot less of xanthan gum than you do of cornstarch. So any recipe that calls for cornstarch, if you want to use xanthan gum instead, you want to use like a quarter, maybe even a little less than a quarter of what it's calling for in cornstarch. You can also use tapioca starch, which is made from cassava root. You can use that as well. You'll want to use a little bit more of that. That's more one-to-one with cornstarch. But xanthan gum, you need so little. So I will use in 13 ounces of liquid like this. If I were going to put xanthan gum in this to thicken it up a little bit, I would use a quarter of a teaspoon. And it would thicken it up a pretty decent amount. The other benefit of this relative to like cornstarch and especially flour, if anyone here is used to making like a roux, when you create a sauce, if you're not familiar with that, a roux is basically where you take some wheat flour, mix it in with some butter and heat that on the stove before adding liquid to it, and creating kind of like a paste almost. And you have to do that first because otherwise the texture will be very strange because the flour will kind of clump up in the liquid. So you have to mix it into the butter first and heat it and get it kind of into a homogeneous paste-like mixture first. Same thing with cornstarch. You always want to kind of mix that into a smaller amount of liquid first, blend it really well, and then mix that in. Xanthan gum does not have that problem. You can take a quarter teaspoon of this, put it into any liquid. It will thicken it up. It does incredibly well. You can do this for anything. You can do it for, I mean, even things like smoothies if you wanted to. It does not need to be heated to thicken something up. Sometimes people put a little bit of xanthan gum in like their gluten-free pancake mixture. So this thing is very, very versatile. If you wanted your texture, the texture of your sauce in your curry to be a little thicker and more saucy, you can absolutely add a little bit of that. All right, we're up to a light simmer here. I'm going to put in a tablespoon of curry paste. I'm going to grab a little whisk. I'm going to whisk that guy around. This is another thing that I usually eyeball, so I'm going to taste it and make sure that the ratio of coconut milk to curry paste is right for this. But you're going to want to taste it. You're going to want to start, if you're unfamiliar with the curry paste that you're working with, start small, like maybe half a teaspoon or half a tablespoon rather, and taste it and see if you like what you're working with, because depending on your spice tolerance, if your spice tolerance is higher, you can start with a tablespoon and try it, but you may find that you like different levels of spice with different types of curry. So I put a tablespoon in here first thing, and I'm going to taste that, see if I like it. And this is a very personal process, so start small, work up as you want it. I'm also going to squeeze a little bit of lemon in here just because I have it handy and I think that tastes good. I'm going to toss bit more salt in this. I recommend salting everything separately. This is something a chef friend of mine taught me. Anytime you're cooking something, you want to salt everything on its own. So I salted the vegetables, I salted the chicken, and then now I've essentially salted the sauce. If I were cooking the sauce separately, I would have salted it on its own, but since it's all in one pot, I've just sort of salted it in here as a easier way to do that. But you want to salt everything separately. It gives you a more accurate kind of salting process all along the way. You're less likely to end up needing way more or way less than you put in. Okay, I think that's pretty good. You want to taste it?
Mm-hmm.
You like it?
That's great.
Got a little heat at the end.
A little heat, yeah.
All right, so this is ready to go. That's done. So we could serve this, but we're going to make apples for you guys first. So in the meantime, I'm going to probably leave this here, and then we'll eat it afterward.
So one more question that's in the chat right now. I'm gonna go read this to you actually. Hold on, read verbatim. It says, is there anything that you prep or cook ahead of time on a regular basis, like for busy days or just need to hit a macro at the end of the day?
Good question. So I usually have some chicken strips from this exact process, especially since I eat this most mornings for breakfast. I usually have some chicken strips laying around. So usually in the morning, I make Justin's breakfast separately because he eats the same 4.5 eggs, orange juice, and banana every single morning. So when I'm cooking this for myself in the morning, I'll make 1 pound of chicken, and because I eat about 3/4 of that pound, I'll have a couple extra chicken strips that I'll leave in the fridge, and I'll have those available in case I want to eat something if I really am just like ravenous and need to eat some protein real quick. I have those available. Another thing, eating superfood at the end of the day is another thing that I do pretty regularly. I try to keep enough meat around and thawed that I can always cook something really, really quickly. I don't prep a lot ahead of time though. We don't do a lot of meal prep here, and for me, that's largely because if meat is even 24 hours old, I think it tastes weird. I can taste the difference between meat that's like, you know, if I cooked it this morning and I eat it this afternoon, that's fine. But like if it's a day or two old, to me, it starts to have a little bit of like a mouthfeel and an aftertaste that really bothers me, and I'm just generally a little squicked out by the taste of leftover meat. So for me, I don't really do that, but you absolutely could with something like this, especially. You could prep a bunch of chicken way ahead of time. You could also cook chicken in an Instant Pot and shred it instead of chopping it up like this, and have a bunch of shredded chicken. Whenever I've done any meal prep or a large amount of food for the two of us, like if we go on a trip with some friends or something and we need to have a lot of food just readily available, and I know we're not going to be really cooking, I will make a ton of shredded chicken and refrigerate it and just have refrigerated shredded chicken, like several pounds of it with us, and that way we can just mix it into anything. We'll like, you know, it's not the best experience in the entire world, but like I'll cut up an avocado or a bell pepper or something and put it with some chicken and just eat that really quickly. Or sometimes we'll just literally eat shredded chicken if we're really at a pinch.
Yeah.
I try to keep ground beef around and thawed at all times, because the most common thing that I eat when I'm really pressed for time is ground beef with taco seasoning. And that's great. That's it. I just eat that.
Yeah, a lot of times I'll find myself too just doing a lot of a protein like ground beef or chicken or shrimp or something like that. If I'm around and cooking on my own and Megan's not around, then I will tend to personally just do meat and then eat fruit. So rather than like, you know, a plate that would traditionally look like a meat and a veggie and a starch or something like that, a lot of times I'll just eat like a 1/2 pound of ground beef with some taco seasoning, and then I'll have an apple or, you know, make a smoothie or something like that. So I do a lot of meat and fruit combination. That works really well for me. But yeah, and also worth noting, like we work from home. The things that we're doing outside of the home tend to be like hobbies or social things or things like that. So most days we are working from home. I'm taking Zoom calls with clients, doing that sort of thing. So we kind of have the luxury of, you know, being able to cook at home. But a lot of these things, like even this recipe that you're seeing right now, for me, I'm not as sensitive to leftover meat as Megan is. I'll eat things for many days after they're cooked. You may be the same way. You could also, I mean, you could 4x this recipe for the whole family, and everybody would have some leftover curry and chicken around if they wanted to eat it. The same way that Megan is saying sometimes she'll have a lot more of this curry sauce than she needs. And tomorrow you might, whip up a little bit of ground beef in a skillet and pour this curry sauce over it and heat it up, and now you have a ground beef curry sauce. There's a lot you can do. And most of the recipes that we did throughout this whole experience, like the meatballs in particular, you can make a bazillion meatballs and have meatballs for a whole week. Same with the curry chicken, The burgers, I guess, would be a little bit, you could definitely make a whole bunch of burgers all at once. It's a little more painstaking to do that recipe. But generally speaking, yeah, the best way to have a lot on hand of something, to cook a bunch of something all at once in a very time crunch way, for us is always going to be the Instant Pot. So I love when Megan used to do that a lot. We'd have shredded chicken on hand, and then we just have Primal Kitchen barbecue dressing or something in the refrigerator, and you just throw some chicken in a bowl, throw some barbecue sauce over it, and you've got yourself a meal, and then eat a banana or something like that.
Yeah, we do that a lot. Ground beef and curry sauce is so good too. Oh my God, sounds amazing. I'll eat that right now. All right, I'm just chopping up these apples.
So we're on to dessert.
We're on to dessert. I'm chopping up these apples in pieces that are about this size. So just chop them relatively evenly. I'm chopping them lengthwise, put them in a bowl. I'm putting 2 apples into this bowl. This will serve for us 2 people. If it's depending on how many carb macros you've got or what you're doing, this could serve 4 to 6 people. If you're just having a couple slices, this could serve many more than that. But this is 2, I would say medium to medium large size apples. Yeah, so just chop those up in there. This is going to be incredibly simple. All right, you're going to use about a tablespoon or a little less of butter per apple.
Per apple, okay.
Per apple. Traditionally, this recipe calls for unsalted butter, and that is because, so we're going to use about a tablespoon and a half. Maybe that's about a tablespoon. I'd say you can use half a tablespoon to 1 tablespoon per apple. That would be my preference, depending on where you're at with your fat macros and what you want to do here. I have preheated our oven to 400, by the way.
Oh, okay. So
the oven is sitting at 400. I did not mention that early because I wasn't sure if we were going to have the apples for this.
We thought we were appleless for the evening.
We have a 400-degree oven, cooking and ready to go. I've got about a tablespoon of butter here. I've got 2 apples cut up and sliced up. So when it comes to the butter, as I was saying, traditionally you would do this with unsalted butter. That is the way it is called for in the recipe. I like to use salted butter because I think everything tastes better with a good bit of salt on it. Even my sweet things, like I put probably 2 teaspoons of salt in my superfood.
Yeah, you put a lot of salt.
Yeah, a lot. So I'm a very pro salt. I like salt on my food sort of person. If that's not you, use unsalted butter. If you are more pro salt friendly, I don't know, you can use salted butter. It's up to you. I use salted butter in basically everything because I like it. That's optional. So
then I always eat every little bit off of the apple cores when she's done cutting them because I don't want it to go to waste.
I'm gonna put about a tablespoon of water in this. I'm going to melt this butter and water mixture, and then I'm going to give you guys another couple of options. You can add, actually I'll do an option now because it needs to melt. You can add some honey into this, depending on how many carbs you need at the end of the day. You can add some stevia to this if you don't have carbs, but you want to add a little additional sweetness. You can also add neither of those things to this because the apples will be sweet enough as they are. Depends on how much sweetness you like, what kind of sweetness you want, and how many carbs you have left at the end of the day, or how much you want to add carbs to your situation. I'm going to put about half a tablespoon of honey. That's about 1 teaspoon, I would say, because we're almost out of this honey. And then I'm going to do about 10 drops of stevia. I'm going to melt this for 30 seconds or so in the microwave. And in the meantime, I'm going to grab some cinnamon. I've also got some 5-spice powder because I really like the taste of this. This is optional for you. This has like fennel, cloves, anise, and white pepper in it. If you like that, you can add a little bit of that. It has a very holiday kind of pumpkin pie spice almost feel to it, which I really like. If you are not so into that, cinnamon alone will do just fine. cinnamon alone is great in a pinch. When we travel around and we're in Airbnbs, they very rarely have a sophisticated palette of different spices. It's usually you're working with something pretty minimal, and I just carry cinnamon around with me. It works very well. You might also, if you have a spritz of lemon handy, this is also not necessary, but you might want to add a little couple drops of lemon to your apples. It just helps kind of brighten up the flavor of everything else in there.
Do you want additional honey, or did you get enough honey?
No, I got some.
Okay. Oops.
Okay. All right, our butter mixture is done. I'm gonna just pour this over the apples. Beautiful. Now I'm going to dust this with a good bit of cinnamon. I would say just take a light dusting. This is totally cinnamon to taste. I would just dust it around, do a light coating on top, and then I'll use, if I were gonna estimate, about 5 times as much cinnamon as 5 spice. 5 spice is pretty intense. If you're using nutmeg or cloves, I would say like dial it down, use a pretty light coating. So, you know, if I did, let's say if that was a teaspoon of cinnamon, this is maybe a 1/4 teaspoon max of 5 spice powder. Okay, now I'm going to mix these apples up. You can mix this with a spoon or you can mix it with your hands. I don't have the same problem with raw apples as I do with raw chicken in my hands. So I'm just gonna mix these up like this. And then these guys are ready to go. So I'm gonna rinse my hands real quick. I'm gonna dump these into a dish and they're gonna be baked for 10 minutes. Try to spread out those apples in such a way that they are not much more than 1 layer deep. They don't have to be perfect, but you don't want a bunch of apples all on top of each other. You want them to be kind of spread out decently well. Let's start this and ready to go. You want to see if you have some questions?
What do we have here? What type of apples, or just whatever is in season?
Whatever's in season is fine. I like Gala apples personally. Fuji apples work really well. I think one of these is a Honeycrisp apple. I just had the grocery store bring us what they had. So I think this was a combo of Gala and Honeycrisp in this situation. Whatever you like, whatever tastes good to you raw will taste good to you in this. All right, that's essentially 10 minutes left before that's over, which in a perfect world I would have planned to have that come out at the same time as the other stuff. But we didn't have the apples. So we can either hang out and answer questions, or we can show the final product in a post-recording after the fact, because really that's all that there is left to do. But we're going to sit in the oven for 10 minutes at 400 degrees, and they are going to be finished and ready to go.
Cool. Yeah, so if you guys have any questions that you want to drop in the chat window right now, feel free to do that. We'll hang out here for a couple minutes and let us know if you have any kind of questions, anything you want to talk about, or anything that you want us to answer. If not, what I'll do is when I drop this group recording into where all these recordings live, where the Dinner Bonus lives, I'll just take a little bit of video of the finished products. Once we have the curry done, the baked apples, all those things done, I can take some video of that for you guys. I can actually add it to the back end of this clip, and it'll all be in one cohesive video that you can see. So if you guys don't have any questions or anything that you want to cover on the live, then we can sign off. We can let you guys go about your night, and then I will let you guys know when this recording is ready, and we'll add some of the finished products in there. Also, I'm very excited about this. We got some crazy local raw honey that has this giant honeycomb in it, which has just been amazing. If you're ever able to get to like a farmer's market or something and get some local raw honey, you can eat that honeycomb. It's amazing. So anyway, just wanted to share that with you because I'm a nerd and I'm excited about it. Let's see if we have anything in here. It doesn't look like it. All right, guys, so we will let this stuff finish cooking. We will put together some finished
so we're
footage
here
for you.
with some
We'll add
finished
recording, and it will all
chicken
be
curry.
waiting for you where all the dinner bonuses
Being
live
laid out.
forever and ever, so you can see them whenever you want to.
It looks
Thank you,
delicious.
Megan.
You guys are gonna get a little bit
My amazing queen,
more high def
most
now. You
beautiful
can
chef
actually
of
see
all
what this
time.
looks like. Much better
Thank you guys for
quality
hanging out with
than
us.
streaming.
Again, I'll upload this
But
for
this
you
is
and
the
you get an
finished
email on the
curry.
back end. Thank you for being
Looks
here.
amazing.
Thank you for your questions. We appreciate
Little
it.
bit of some
Now wait to eat this food.
Leftover
Now we will
curry
sign off.
sauce here.
One more quick check. Yep, no questions in the chat. All right, guys. Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye.
Yeah, probably have some ground beef curry tomorrow. So there you have it. There's the curry, and we'll be back with a finished version of the baked apples. Okay, what do we have here?
Okay, so these are the finished apples. Earlier in the recording, I said that they needed to be in there for 10 minutes. That's the minimum time to bake the apples. These have been baked for 40 minutes. These are obviously a lot more cooked. I took them out at 10 minutes, and they were just sort of like crisp, tender. They were warmed through, but still like quite crispy. If you like your apples like that, 10 minutes is kind of the minimum that you want to bake them for. 20-30 minutes in, they start to get softer, and by 40 to 50 minutes, they are quite soft, like more apple pie filling kind of vibes. So it very much depends on how you like your apples. These, as I said, are about 40-45 minutes in, and I've taken them out and we are going to eat them, but anywhere between 10 and 45 minutes should do it, depending on how you like them, and that's it. It's very simple.
Amazing. These look delicious. They smell even better. I cannot wait for you guys to make these and just experience the smell and the taste. And we hope you enjoyed watching. Thanks so much.